to another edition of the Injury to Recovery YouTube channel. My name is Greg, this is Blaine, and Blaine is the physical therapist that owns Recover Physical Therapy in Twin Falls. And what are we talking about today, Blaine?
ACL injuries.
ACL injuries. You know, that's interesting. I have a family member that just had an ACL injury. She was walking along, she slipped on some water, and she buckled her knee, and now she's set for a surgery.
Darn.
It's kind of painful, I'm sure.
I hate to hear that.
Yeah. So, well, tell us what you want to talk about on this.
Yeah, so ACL injuries are a pretty broad topic to cover. So we'll talk about probably three different things today. First off, prevention. So the best way to deal with ACL injuries is to prevent them from happening in the first place, when possible. And secondly, we'll talk a little bit about surgery and what that entails and what the recovery is like. And then lastly, we'll talk about rehabilitation and what the rehab process looks like after an ACL reconstruction surgery.
Yeah. We're kind of new to this. It might be that we break this up into a couple of different videos, but either way, we'll try to get it all together for you so you can find all of this stuff together on the channel.
Yeah, so ACL tears, they most commonly happen in sports. And so we see them a lot in soccer and basketball. They're also very common in skiing, football, volleyball, softball. And so sports where you're changing direction, they're very common. And sometimes they're preventable and sometimes they're not. So sports where you're tackled, like in football, it's hard to prevent those from happening. That's part of the game. But however, a lot of ACL tears happen during deceleration or during landing. And so, for example, if someone's grabbing a rebound in a basketball game and they come down, a lot of times they'll land and they may be fatigued and their knee kind of buckles awkwardly inward. And that's often a way where people will tear their ACL. Or if they're sprinting up the field and they cut and change direction, and you'll see this really awkward inward bending of their knee. It's called a valgus force. It's not pleasant to watch. And you can almost always tell when someone's torn their ACL by watching those videos, and you can also put them on the treatment table. And your ACL is a big ligament in your knee. It's not huge. It's about as big around as your little finger, and it connects your femur to your tibia, your thigh bone to your shin bone, and it holds your knee. It gives your knee stability. And so when it tears, we can often just manipulate your knee, and we can feel that it's torn.
So my family member, when she got hurt, she actually had a lot of swelling. Is that pretty common with some of those injuries?
Yes, it almost always happens, and it's usually quite painful initially. And then if it's a full tear, then the pain actually usually subsides fairly quickly within a day or so. And with full tears, the recommendation usually is surgery. And they usually like to wait about a month between the injury to the surgery because they like to wait for that swelling to go down before they cut you open.
Yeah. And this is actually, well, we'll talk about surgery in a minute, but I have a question about that when we get there.
Sure. So, as mentioned previously, prevention is key. And so the ACL tears that happen that are non-contact when you're just cutting or you're landing, those can be prevented. There's some pretty good studies out there. ACL tears are very heavily researched in the medical literature. And athletes that go through proper training protocols are statistically less likely to tear their ACLs in sports. And so, in a nutshell, these programs basically build up the strength in your thighs and your hips and your core. They make your knees really strong, and they teach you to land gracefully. And so, learning to jump off a box and land with good control and good power is a great way to prevent ACL tears.
So that's your proper training protocol that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So you just practice it, or what do you do?
Yeah, and we'll show some videos about this in a minute, but a lot of things like squats and lunges and hamstring curls, exercises that make these muscles really strong. Muscles, quads in the front, hamstrings in the back. Also having a really strong core is important. And just practicing landing. And so if you do something as simple as climb up on your kitchen chair and jump off and land, that's a really good way to prevent ACL tears.
I don't know if it was some sort of urban myth, but when I was younger, I remember people saying, oh yeah, football players like to do ballet and stuff like that. And I would imagine that if that were true, that would be the reason, is they want to avoid an injury like this.
Probably so, and that goes to the fact that, interestingly, youth athletes who participate in two sports are less likely to get injured than athletes that participate in just one sport. And so that cross-training, it works muscles differently and it cross-trains you, so...
So two different kinds of sports, essentially.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So focusing youth on just one sport is generally not recommended, and sometimes we see that nowadays where people get really gung-ho about, traveling sports, and people want to see their child develop into a scholarship athlete. And that's okay, but if you want to do that, it's probably best to have them in more than just one sport.
Yeah. Think about it as a long-term
Yes.
longevity in their sport if they do both things.
Yeah.
What was it? Michael Jordan played baseball and basketball. So.
Yeah, and interestingly, most successful college and professional athletes did participate in several sports when they were growing up.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yep.
Is that everything you want to talk about on prevention?
So again, prevention, not all of them are preventable. If you get tackled awkwardly in football, you can't prevent that, but you can get your legs really strong so that when you're cutting, sprinting, landing, if you can get your legs really strong to tolerate those forces, then you are less likely to tear your ACL.
Nice.
So we'll talk, why don't we go ahead and we'll show some exercises that are good prevention type exercises.
Okay, let's do it.
So one of the bread and butter exercises for keeping really strong knees for ACL prevention is just doing squats. And so Greg's squatting with the bar here on his back. And so the amount of weight you want to put on it depends on the age of your athletes and how much experience they have lifting. But you want to have enough weight where they get burned out pretty good by about the 10th rep. And so this is a great exercise. Get your knees really strong and your hips nice and strong. And so basically you can go all the way down until you drop your bottom all the way to the floor. There is a myth out there that says that might hurt your knees, and there's really no data to support that. But it is good to train yourself to go nice and deep, and that'll get your knees nice and strong. So that's a great ACL prevention exercise.
And keep your back straight.
Yep, you want to keep your back pretty straight doing this. So this next exercise is called Nordic hamstring curls. And so you can either tuck your heels under a piece of equipment, or I'm going to hold Greg's heels here, and he's going to hold his hips and his body as straight as possible. And he's going to go down and kind of push himself up and pull himself back up. And so I'm sure you can feel, Greg, that works your hamstrings, the muscles in the back of your thighs, nice and works them hard, doesn't it?
Yep.
So if you're a high school coach, at the end of practice, you can have your athletes line up and pair up, and you can have them do about 10 of these Nordic hamstring curls. Having your hamstrings nice and strong is a great way to prevent ACL tears. Alright, doing okay there?
Yep.
So this next exercise is called pistol squats. And so Greg is standing on just one foot, and he's slowly controlling himself as he sits back down and stands back up. And this can be, I would recommend you do this with a chair initially like Greg is doing it. As you build strength and these become easier, you can actually pull the chair out. And some people that have really high levels of fitness can dip down nice and deep on just one leg. So this requires a high level of control of your balance and your strength. But starting with the chair is a great way to start out with that one. And so we'll shoot another view here where he's facing forward. And this is kind of a good training principle too. Whenever you're training on just one leg, that requires a lot more balance than when you're training with both legs. And that's anything you do to train on one leg is a great way to improve control and decrease the risk of ACL tears.
So when I'm thinking about the one leg, obviously it won't prevent, that moment when you've got the wrong angle for your joint.
Yeah.
Would it decrease the likelihood that something might happen?
Yeah, so if we take like 100 athletes and we put them through these training protocols and show them all these exercises, we know that like for every, I'm kind of making up numbers here, but for every, I think it's about 100 athletes that goes through these protocols, you're going to decrease the risk of an ACL injury by 1 per season. And so if you're a coach who's been coaching basketball for 30 years, that's significant.
Yeah, one more athlete that you can have on the field is definitely worth it.
So these next couple exercises are going to focus on core core strength and hip strength. And so Greg is holding a plank nice and straight there, which just holding a plank in and of itself is challenging, and he's making it more challenging by doing a leg lift with his other leg. So that works both hips pretty heavy. And so if your athletes can do 10 of those on each side, that is a good indicator that their hips and their cores are fairly strong. So is that feeling okay, Greg?
Oh yeah.
It's a good burn, isn't it?
We'll get all 10 on each side for you.
There you go. So you have great hip and core strengthening exercise right there. So this is obviously you're holding a plank in the forward direction and just alternating, bringing your knees forward like that. Great way to strengthen the core. And I mentioned earlier having strong knees is obviously very important for ACL prevention, but these protocols, it's also important to have a full balanced strength to your core and your hips as well.
So when we talk about mountain climbers, there's other ways to do them.
Yeah.
So I could go here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up. And it's good to vary it and work on different ones. And you can also do it kind of fast, where you're like just doing very gentle toe taps.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel how that works differently. So if you're a coach and you have all your athletes do this for maybe 60 seconds or so at the end of practice, they'll have their cores burning and strengthens their hip flexors as well in the front of their hips. So Greg shows 3 nice variations of the mountain climber there. And you can see he's a little bit out of breath.
Yeah, that'll put you into, we'll wear you out pretty quick.
This next exercise, as I mentioned earlier, we want to practice landing and jumping, and being able to control that land nice and gracefully and with good power is really important. So this is a more advanced exercise. You want to get strong doing like your squats and your hamstring curls first, like we showed you previously. And then once you have a good foundation there, you can practice hopping off of a box or a chair. And as Greg lands, you'll notice he's keeping his knees wide. And so what we don't want to have happen is when athletes land, we don't want to let their knees knock together, which real often we'll see that in adolescent athletes, especially kids who have just especially kids who have just gone through their growth spurt. So you want to have them have them practice jumping off the top bleacher onto the court, and have them practice landing and letting their knees stay nice and wide and keep a little bit of spring as you land. And so the higher the surface they're jumping off of, the more challenging, obviously. So you want to start with smaller steps, and then you could advance to taller boxes or chairs or bleachers or whatever you have to work with. And so notice how he's landing with a little bit of spring. It's not a real hard land, and that's ideal. He's training his muscles to slowly decelerate that weight as he contacts the floor. And then the more advanced version of this would be to practice landing on just one foot.
Okay.
So we'll probably go to not quite such a tall surface for that. But again, as he lands, you want to take a look at his knee and make sure it doesn't buckle inward. But you want to have it stay in line, and if anything, move a little bit to the outward. And so practicing hopping off and landing at one foot is a great way to train an athlete not to tear their ACL.
Hey, that's even the weak knee for me.
That feeling okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so your form looks quite good there.
Yeah.
Okay, the last exercise we're going to show you here for ACL tear prevention is doing some explosive calf raises. And so Greg is just standing on the edge of the step with one foot only, and he's doing a real quick explosive calf raise. And after you do about 10 or 12 of these, you should feel a pretty good burn in your calves. And so your calves are really important landing muscles. So if you have good strong calves, it's going to help you land with more spring and more cushion. And if you have weak calves, then you'll land on a harder foot, and that'll put more force through your knee and make you more likely to tear your ACL when you're landing. So having good strong calves is an important component to preventing ACL tears.
Bend your knee while you do these or not?
Great question, and it's actually good to do it both ways. There's 2 main calf muscles, and one of them crosses your knee and the other one does not. And so if you do some of these with a straight knee, it will hit a more superficial muscle. And if you do them with a bent knee, it will hit a deeper calf muscle. And it's good to do both.
Well, I can tell you you can definitely feel the difference between the two
Yeah.
as you're going through this.
You're starting to feel the burn pretty good.
Yeah, I'm on almost rep 18 right now, or something like that.
There you go, yeah. And so you want your athletes to be able to do these, not just, not just till they burn out, but you want them to, as the season goes on, as they progress through the training, to increase their repetitions. So it might be something you track at the beginning of the season, track how much they improve.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for the next exercise, Greg is going to show you some explosive lunges. So his first two are just kind of regular lunges here. And if he gets faster, he makes them more explosive. That trains those landing muscles a little bit better and creates more power. And so for athlete training, for ACL tear prevention, we want to first develop a good foundation of strength. So you might, if your athletes are weak at the beginning of the season, you can start with just regular lunges, and as they get in shape, you can advance these more advanced, power lunges where he's pushing quicker. So strength is the foundation, and you can build upon that. You can put power on top of that, but you got to have good strength before you can develop good power.
This would probably make your sprinters or sports that use sprinting a lot faster too, right?
Yeah, and that's really the beauty of a lot of these exercises, is that not only will they reduce the chances of injury, but they will make your athletes better athletes, more explosive, more powerful.
Blaine, you gave me a workout on this one.
Good.
Thank you. That was awesome. So, as we were discussing this, one of the things that came up while we were not on video, you were talking a little bit about practice setup for some sports, like coaches and stuff like that, some things that they might want to consider. So,
Yeah.
want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the order that you structure your practice for your athletes is important. So if you do it the right way, you can reduce the chances of an injury during practice. And so the right way to do it, so suppose you're a soccer or a basketball coach and you're training your athletes on certain plays and techniques. So you want to do that stuff first while they're fresh in practice. And of course you can do a jogging warm up and stuff and get the blood flowing first. But do your plays and your techniques first. And then at the end of practice is when you want to do all these types of, these intense lifting, jumping, lunges type things. Because if you do all your lunges and your hamstring curls at the beginning and make your athletes all tired and then go have them practice layups, then they're more likely to get hurt. And so ACL injuries usually happen when athletes are more fatigued, so they're much more likely to happen in the fourth quarter than they are the first quarter. Or if you're a skier, it usually happens on your last run down the mountain.
Oh yeah, everybody. That's always the thing. I shouldn't have gone on that last run.
Yep.
So, I'm not a coach. If I'm thinking about my own personal exercise, I might want to consider that myself as well. If I'm going to go out and I want to develop myself over time, I might want to, at the end of a workout where I played basketball with my friends or soccer with my friends, that's the time that I would want to finish up my workout with maybe 10 lunges or something like that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Just don't wear yourself out doing a bunch of squats and then go play the weekend warrior basketball game, because it's just gonna, if you start out fatigued, you're more likely to get hurt while playing.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome, that was some great information. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one does, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next week.